Welcome to Amidst the Chaos, the podcast where we dare to find God in the middle of real life, not just the highlight reel. I'm your host, Amber Gallion, and around here we build on one foundation only, Jesus. In each episode, I'll share my journey with God, wins, wounds, questions and all, and how He brings order, clarity, and peace into the chaos of everyday life. So take a breath, bring whatever you're carrying today, and let's lean into the one who never changes, even when everything else does. Hey friend, welcome back to Amidst the Chaos. I'm Amber Gallion, and today we're starting lesson 3 of Discipleship Evangelism. The link to the lesson is linked in the description in case you want to read the lesson yourself. And this one is called Righteousness by Grace, and it's written by Don Crow. And in this lesson, he asks a man, what do you think you have to do in order to get to heaven? And this man responds with keeping the 10 commandments and then a few other things. And then Don responds with that you would have to have a righteousness that equals God's righteousness. This means that you have to be as holy as God Himself. And the only way to achieve this is by keeping all 613 commandments that were written down in the Old Testament. That is a lot of rules. And some of them you may know by heart, like don't murder anyone. This is probably and hopefully one that is easy to keep. These commandments, also known as Moses' law, because Moses is the one who wrote them down in Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Leviticus, was given by God to us, not as a guide to show us how to live, but to show us that it's impossible to maintain that standard, because it's so easy to get distracted for even just a second. And that 1 second is enough to call it a sin. But God had a plan, and His name is Jesus. Jesus was capable of fulfilling the law because He was born from a virgin and the Holy Spirit. That means that unlike anyone else, He was free from sin from birth. Adam and Eve were made in the image of God, but because they allowed sin to fall on this world, Adam's seed became corrupt, and we're all born from that seed. And that is how the sinful nature is passed on from generation to generation. This is why Jesus had to be born from a virgin and the Holy Spirit. And because He was so perfect and righteous, His sacrifice at the cross became the permanent payment for our lives, us sinners. And by believing in Jesus and the sacrifice that He made and accepting the salvation, you become righteous yourself. And I'm so grateful for the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross, because if it hadn't been for Him, I would have had to maintain all of the commandments. And looking at my life, I know I have broken many. Let me give you a few examples. I was in the New Age for a couple of years. And in Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 18, there are commandments about not to perform or consult fortune tellers, not to engage in astrology, not to attempt contacting the dead, and not to consult with mediums. Yeah, check, 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 guilty. And when you look at the astrology one, you have probably picked up a magazine somewhere and there was a page about your daily or weekly horoscope. Maybe at some point, out of curiosity or just as a joke, let's read it and see what it says. And even though you weren't taking it seriously, you were engaging with astrology. So do you see how easy it is to be manipulated into sin? And when you look at Isaiah chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." And I can give you an example of that one for my own life, because in Leviticus 11, verse 4, it talks about not to eat unclean animals. And there's this whole list on how you can determine whether an animal is unclean or not. I had no knowledge about this in combination with Christianity. I had heard about things being kosher for Jews, halal for Muslim, and pigs considered unclean for Muslims to eat. That is all I knew. And looking at the list that was mentioned in the Bible, I realized that a lot of those things I ate at some point in my life. And even though Jesus came to fulfill the law, He didn't come to abolish the law. There are still commandments that we uphold that are in our constitutional laws, and others are still moral laws. I mean, legally, it's okay to move in together with someone that you're not married to. I've done that. It felt morally wrong to me, but I thought I had to accept it because that's just how the world works. So again, I point out Hosea 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Had I known God back then, had I known what was in the Bible, I would have made different decisions. And even though I've accepted Jesus and I've received the righteousness by grace, I still want to live a life where I make the right decisions. I still want to honor the person that sacrificed his life for me. If I would step out of my front door tomorrow and be held at gunpoint by someone, but someone steps in front and catches the bullet, I would want to make sure that I would live a life that made the other person losing their life not in vain. Don Crow says in his lesson, God made righteousness available to you and me as a gift. All I had to do was receive it. It didn't cost me anything. And it's the biggest, most important gift I've ever received. And I want to make sure that I honor Jesus with the decisions I make in my life. Not because I have to earn something, but because of how grateful I am. And also because I realize how much better my life is to die to the old self and let God change everything in me that is not aligned with the person He wants me to become. The gift of righteousness is basically a gift that keeps on giving, as long as you continue to unwrap it. Did you receive the gift? And are you using it to its full potential? I encourage you to ask God these questions. And I can promise you that listening to His answer and following instructions that He gives you will inevitably make your life better. More peace, more joy, more holy, more love, all the good stuff, and less of all the bad stuff. Sounds good? Feels even better. All right, we'll leave it here for today. Thanks for listening to Amidst the Chaos. I'm your host, Amber Gallion, and my prayer is that today's episode helped you see Jesus a little more clearly right in the middle of your own mess and motion. If this encouraged you, share it with someone who might need the reminder that God is building order, even when life feels anything but stable. Until next time, keep walking, keep wrestling, and keep building on the only foundation that won't move, Jesus.